police and politicians, and they express their frustration. The police say they come, they close down the crack houses, the drug houses, only to have them open the next day. What we are saying is that we work together with the police. If the police can do their job of closing it down, and since apparently they don't have either the ability or the desire, I don't know, I'll leave that up to your imagination, to do it, we said, let's work together. You close them down, let the people, the committed people in the community, stand up and keep them closed.
Let me ask you this. What happened in D.C., assume for a second that what I said before from what I read in the papers and what I was told earlier today actually happened, that people did beat up a camera person and who was filming the Muslims in D.C. beating up someone else. Do you oppose that?
Certainly.
Okay.
I mean, certainly.
I'm glad to hear that.
Mr. Siegel.
Let me say this. Let me just say this again. I think that you're not focusing on the real issue.
The real issue being the drugs.
Let me tell you the real. That's right. The real issue being the drugs. And the point is, let's get together with this patrol in Washington D.C. Get together, talk to them, let them understand what are the guidelines. Don't be so quick to criticize them on national television. And you haven't sat down with them and said, look, I think in essence you have a good idea, but let's work together and see how we can make this program better. And I think that that's more appropriate to do than what you're attempting to do right now.
Well, let me just say that I will speak out not only locally but nationally in any instance when I hear that people are using violence against other people, especially in the instance of a cameraman who is filming something out on the public street. I won't be embarrassed or ashamed for that, sir. I will speak out, and I think that what we have to do is recognize that there are a lot of serious problems, drugs included, and I think that you have to respond in a nonviolent fashion because the history and tradition of this country in America, which makes it great, is bringing people together, all different kinds of people, to solve the problems.
Mr. Siegel, we're going to have to take a break now, and when we come back, we'll discuss whether the ACLU is a part of the solution to the drug problem or whether it's a part of the problem itself.
And Imam Siraj Wahaj, leader of the Muslim mosque. Imam Wahaj, supposing that somebody pulls a gun on you, supposing that one of those drug dealers that you see dealing in drugs pulls a gun, a member of the Jamaica gang, say, will it be very long before you'll have to carry a gun too?
Let me first make a correction, and I respectfully tell you, your audience, that we object to be called black Muslims. We're Muslims. We're ones who submit our will to do the will of Allah. That's the first point.
What do you want to be called?
Muslims. We're Muslims. That's what we're called. We're Muslims,
right.
Not black Muslims or white Muslims. We're Muslims.
All right.
That's the first point. The second point, the drug dealers are pulling guns on people daily, and people losing their lives. And we don't carry weapons. If someone pulled a gun on me, I would have to try to defend myself the best way I can. We're not going to resort to carrying weapons. We believe that this society should be protected, and those law enforcement agents have to do the job that they have to do. And the same question you're posing to me is the question that you have to pose to all of the citizens of this country. And again, what we're doing is a deterrent. And I believe that if the people of this city and the people of this country, Washington, D.C., and New York City, and Detroit, and all over the country, if the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims and other people would stand up and take back their community from these people, these drug dealers, they would have to go. And I want to say this very, very carefully, that ultimately we know that what we're doing is not the answer. The answer is to absolutely to destroy the demand. For me as a Muslim and the rest of the Muslims, it's prohibited for us to take drugs and to sell them. So there's no problem with drugs for us. And so we know ultimately the answer is, as Nancy Reagan to have the power to say no, as we have the power to say no.
No, Nancy Reagan that's all PR, public relations. Just say no. She walks around talking about that, but where's the federal dollars for drug rehabilitation programs? And most important, where are the federal, city, and state funds for drug education? I go on the trains, I ride the buses in New York, I don't see the posters, I don't see people out on the street corners doing the education to young people today about why they shouldn't be on drugs. There's no funding for it.
I don't differ with you, and I think that...
And that's the issue we have to work together on.
I think that you're correct that we need funding, but I'm not going to stand and wait for the federal government to come into my community and give me funds. I'm saying that I have a responsibility in my community, and we have responsibility in our community to educate our children and educate our community.
And I'm with you on that point.
And I am saying this also. I agree with you that the government is not doing enough. The people in America spend about $130 billion a year on illegal drugs. And obviously something is wrong with our appetite for us to spend that kind of money on illegal drugs. So there's a lot of problems we have, and I think, again, the ultimate solution is to have the education available to teach the people, to inspire them to do the good and stay away from the wrong.
Mr. Siegel, let me ask Mr. Siegel a question. You described as the alternative to these Muslim patrols, which you don't like. You've talked about education, and you've talked about changing the system, which would take an awful long time, that's for sure. What are you going to do about the drug problem in cities today? There was a story in the Washington Post the other day that the headline was, "Drug violence redefines city life." It's ruining our cities. What are you going to do today?
Well, we're going to try to articulate what the real problem is. We're going to try to articulate how the drugs come here, who's benefiting from the drugs, and try to awaken citizens. I walk the streets. I live and work in Manhattan. I'm on the trains. I'm out on the streets. I understand what's happening. And what you have to do, Fred, is you have to make sure before, when you said, well, I'm not a drug dealer, you got to make sure that when people are out there, they're disciplined and trained so that they don't think that you happen to look like someone that you're not supposed to be, because that could lead to all kinds of violence, and you have to draw that line very carefully. The history of this country, unfortunately, shows people taking the law into their own hands. There were people
Is that a bigger problem than the drug problem we have right now? That's all you're talking about, is
Fred,
mistaken identity.
Fred, I'm really surprised at you. It's all interconnected. You can't just throw out constitutional rights.
I didn't say anything about throwing out constitutional rights.
When you're talking about before, Fred, you opened the show by saying, and well, maybe a few people will be roughed up. Hell no. Hell no to that.
One of them was a guy with a shotgun. What do you want to do? Let him run rampant in the neighborhood?
All right,
wait a minute. Let him answer
Let me answer
that about the guy with the shotgun. What do you do with a guy like that when the Muslims confront him?
You call the cops. They're the people who are the law enforcement people in this country. We can't allow other people. I think Tom's question before was a very good one. I think the leader of the Muslims in Brooklyn gave a good response. He said they don't use weapons. However, I'm afraid that what happened in D.C. is the inevitable result of that kind of patrol and vigilantism. If they are disciplined in Brooklyn, and I haven't heard so far in Brooklyn any kind of incidents what I heard in Washington. If they're disciplined and they become that deterrent role model, no problem with me. But when it gets to the point that what happened in D.C., and when you start having things, it's all connected to Getz taking out his gun and blowing people away on the subway, and Charles Bronson movies sending out a message to America, if you don't like what's going on, blow them away, we're in pretty deep trouble. And Fred, if that happens, I'm coming back to you and saying, you said it's okay to rough up a few people.
Fred, might I say something here? Mr. Siegel, I'm very, must say that I'm very surprised with your response. I think that, your fears perhaps are unwarranted to some degree. On the one hand, you are afraid of this, you keep, throwing out there vigilantism. We don't represent that. And I don't think that the people in Washington, D.C. represent that. We had an incident.
What do you call beating up a cameraman?
Okay.
What do you call beating up a cameraman?
I'm saying you had an incident again, and I'm saying I think the emphasis should be in communication. Let us communicate with the patrol in Washington, D.C., and let us look at it. Let's look at what we've done. We've done this in Brooklyn over 60 days. There's been no incidences of violence at all. Okay, so therefore, what I'm saying is that we have created a model. It works. No violence. It works. Let's try to create that same model all over in Washington, D.C. and other places. And rather than trying to instill fear into the people and try to make a connection with us, and I think that what you should do, you should have had on this program those people from Washington, D.C. who represented those patrols. Let them explain themselves.
I assume they were invited. I assume that they were invited. Is that, I think that was so, and I don't think they...
And I think that somehow you might be given the impression, either unwittingly that we are part of the same group, and then...
No, I wouldn't do that. I know New York too well. You can't make that connection. I acknowledged on the show that I haven't heard...
It has nothing to do with New York City or Washington, D.C. It has everything to do with people being fed up. And what you have to deal with, Mr. Siegel...
Yeah, but you got to be careful about the language.
You have to be very careful, Mr. Siegel, but you also have to understand this, is that everybody is declaring war on drugs, and the only ones that are dying are the innocent people of the street. And people are tired, people are frustrated. And while they are frustrated and tired, I am suggesting this: let us train ourselves in the correct manner within the law to fight back in the way that we have to fight back within the boundaries that are set down for us, so that we can protect ourselves and protect our property and protect our families.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry our time is up. I'd like to thank our guests, Norman Siegel, the Executive Director of the New York American Civil Liberties Union, and Imam Siraj Wahaj, the leader of the Muslim Mosque in New York. And when we come back, I'll straighten out the flaws in Tom's thinking.